recording won't be long, but the recording will contain the crux of what it is we're doing today. So would somebody like to read the first page here, the introduction to the workshop?
Yeah, I can read it, Eric.
Thank you. If you just get a little closer because you're just a little faint.
Okay, is this
There you
better?
go. Yeah.
Listening beyond the mind's noise. Our objective is to listen for clarity beyond the mind's noise. So we learn of a refusal to acknowledge fear and to look beyond the analytical and evaluative, critical mind, turning inward for holy guidance. We learn to bring every notion into peaceful, healing contemplations, into our commitment for receiving miracle-mindedness. This is a goal of A Course in Miracles. Peace is achieved as we are learning to accept healing in all of our relationships through the inspired practice of prayerful forgiveness. Due to belief in a limited ego body, the mind appears to materialize and seems to have been split into parts. Your higher self, or Christ consciousness, knows that you remain God's perfect and sinless creation. Your egoic aspect is suffering, limiting awareness, imagining you as a separating identification with a body that seemingly can oppose God's will. As long as we follow erroneous thoughts, we will misperceive and miscreate. Higher Christ consciousness is needed so we can see beyond our limiting beliefs, and so we will discover the vision of right-minded certainty. The Course introduces a simplification for understanding the ego's thought system as though there are 4 separation concepts. Miracle-mindedness brings about realization of what we really are, God's beloved. As we accept oneness, the Course directs us to transcend physical level neediness, providing specific guidance and corrections that will awaken in us a peaceful, joyful, naturally loving miracle mindfulness. The Course introduces a simplification for understanding God's will as though there are 4 heavenly joining concepts. Our workshop will focus on these concepts and on accepting the protective miracles of holy functional ways for looking at the world in our minds, and our perceptions thus will reflect the guidance we choose. We'll look beyond the mad beliefs that seemingly can gain unconscious hold of great intensity to grip our minds with terror, fear, and anxiety so strong that it will not relinquish its ideas about its own protection.
Thank you, Robin. So the idea here is that we're going to be shown everything that we need to understand. We're going to be learning about everything that we need in terms of how to learn it is already been presented to us in the 31 chapters that we already covered. So at this point, our task really is to try and remember the integrative changes that have occurred. In other words, what I have learned about myself in terms of reserving judgment, in terms of not finding myself needing to blame others for how I feel, in terms of not realizing, in terms of realizing the truth is always shown to me in its entirety and never is divided. And so, in fact, if I seem to have a problem understanding where I stand in terms of my interacting with others, then the problem is really in my mind. It really isn't out there in the world. And so all the corrective action has to happen at the mind level, not really in the physical reality whatsoever at all. However, the physical reality does, of course, have its symptoms of what's going on in the mind. And so I may find myself suffering tension and feeling ill at ease and stuff like that when my body gets into a flight or flight state. And so my body can have a fight or flight state, but that fight or flight decision has already occurred in my mind before my body has begun to react to whatever has gone on. So in the Course in Miracles, we're basically being shown that when we find ourselves to be upset and we find ourselves to be suffering physically from that condition, whether it's a mild headache or whether it's some other symptom that comes on sort of suddenly, you can bet that it has to do with that kind of stress that has put you into a fight or flight state. And therefore, we know that we have to deal with our physiological problem first. In other words, become calm, try some deep breathing, try some relaxation techniques, and try to take our mind off of feeling that we've been harmed or unfairly treated until, in fact, we can relax and feel peaceful, realizing that we're safe now. So we need that level of safety or security seems to need to be satisfied before we can be more fully ourselves and face our problems peacefully, whatever they seem to be. So the course introduces a lot of simplifications as to how to go about doing that. And we call the main simplification the acceptance of the atonement plan, which basically has three parts. And we talked about it in the Song of Prayer, because in the Song of Prayer, it's identified clearly as prayer is followed by a meditative sort of state of willingness for forgiveness. And in willingness for forgiveness then is presented typically then a ladder of prayer in which there are progressive realizations of the fact of the real need for and the real possibility for forgiveness. And then the beginnings of the release of our suffering, finding that our own suffering is what, in fact, we're really continuing to suffer from. And then in letting go of our own suffering, we begin to see that healing already automatically begins as soon as we let go of our own suffering. Because it's our own suffering that's blocking us from seeing that there could be a very peaceful solution to any difficulties that we actually seem to have had with any other people or any particular situations and circumstances. In most cases, they can be resolved peacefully. And so in most cases, we can return to peace as we begin to see the worthiness of forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. And then the healing begins to occur such that our minds can now be used by the miracle principles that can be communicated more directly to us. Because now that we begin to recognize the true value of our friends and our family and our bosses and coworkers and whoever else was involved, now that we begin to recognize the true value of them, that they are upholding also the same sort of values that we want to uphold and so on and so forth, whatever we rationalize it, doesn't have to be rationalized so much now as just recognized that I value them and that my love for them is more important to me than what seemed to have happened that upset me. And now I begin to see what happened that seemed to upset me as a lesson now for the continuance of my peaceful progress in spiritual development. And so I begin to see things completely differently. And so I begin not to suffer anymore, but also even to be healed now instead of to have to return to this oscillating back and forth between suffering and healing, suffering and healing. I begin to see the clarity now of making that choice to always remain in this recognition of the truth or recognizing of the truth, rather than to be removed from it. And I begin to see that by sharing more peacefully and by valuing more calmly the fact that I value who I love, then I find that I'm not as easily moving off into these transgressions or these difficulties with my mind seeming to find that somebody needs to be judged or somebody needs to be punished or something's gone wrong. And so it begins to make greater sense to me. Anybody want to ask any questions about that whole process at all? So we can.
It's just incredibly timely, Eric, because it's interesting. I just literally just before I haven't been up long, but just before I got onto this call, I just have a quick scan of my emails, and I purchased a session from a woman in America, and like, you know, we pay a lot in Australia because it's American dollars, obviously. So it was, you know, about $300. And the session, she said she couldn't hear me. She didn't really need to have to hear me. I mean, I could hear her clearly because she was supposedly doing the reading. So she didn't really need to, you know, she could have said, you know, whatever, you know, can you put your hand up and let me know you're still hearing? Because I could hear everything she was saying. But anyway, so she said there was technical issues. So basically the reading didn't happen, but she was still going to send me she was channeling a drawing as she was supposedly giving me messages, and of course the parcel's gone missing in the. I've just never received the parcel, and and anyway, so I emailed her and she didn't respond, and so I've emailed her again and said, what did I say? That it didn't feel in integrity. I said initially there was technical issues, and now there's a postal issue. I said, I'm not, obviously, you can't do much about technical issues or postal issues. However, it doesn't feel in integrity. And I just left it at that. And then she replied and said, well, here's the tracking number if you want to follow it up. So, of course, I've gone on to see the tracking number, and it says this parcel can't be tracked. You need to complete a form, which obviously she needs to complete because she's got all the information about when she, and so I haven't heard back. And, it's like, I straight away go into this, oh, well, what is that mirroring into me? What is that telling me? But at the end of the day, practicalities, I've paid $300 for something that I never received. And it seems like because it's not her fault or mine, where do I stand? And so it's, it's really talking to this completely like, yes, I can choose to just let it go and, forget about it. But obviously it is an accountability thing. I think there should be some kind of, insurance or some kind of policy, or, policy is probably a big word, but, there should be something around, can people just send money to places? And I know it happens. People lose money all the time. But, it does feel like it's not in integrity. And do we just, when I say let them go, I mean, let them go to give ourselves peace, but in terms of just pretending it never happened and no one knows about it except me and the person who I didn't go through her. I went through a tele summit. So technically I probably should go back to the tele summit and say, what's your policy on, customers who don't receive what they've paid for. So I may just do that. But at this point, that's where it's at. And yes, I believe metaphysically it's, something that's I've attracted, but in terms of the actual resolution, it's it doesn't feel in integrity either way to do nothing. And so this is exactly what's going on for me right now.
For me, I have some of those issues sometimes that goes on more than just one time to look at it. So sometimes we have to look at some of these things for more than one time. Sometimes I do let go of the angst about it, or the anxiety or the difficulty about it in my mind, and come up with, oh, there's another thing to do here. Oh, I see. There's another thing I could do here. So I come up with that, and that's my part. The integrative work is our part. So when we see something that we can do to deal with our difficulties, then we can do that to deal with our difficulties. And when we don't see anything, that's when we bring it into this idea here, is that I need to make better decisions than the ones I'm making, because the ones I'm making are upsetting me. So it's not really so much of a letting it go. It's more of a realization. I want the upset of it replaced. I can't get God to replace the $300 or the item that's missing. So I'm not asking him to do that.
No, that's right.
But on the other hand, in terms of the ease of peacefulness, it isn't the law of attraction. It's the truth that in miracle-mindedness, miracles happen. So I'm not saying a miracle will happen and the package would appear the next day or something like that. I'm saying that in my mind, in peacefulness, then my mind is open to miracles, and miracles do happen. Beautiful. What happens isn't necessarily the law of attraction sort of way of describing it, although it also can be described through that method, which I've heard a lot of people do that they say they manifest through the vortexes and stuff like that. And, to them, it makes sense. And to them also, there is a grain of truth in it for sure, because what they're usually saying is that they have to get clear in their mind and peaceful in their mind to remain within that vortex where things are manifest from. And I'm saying similar thing. I'm saying that I need to be in spirit to find the resolution to my problem, because my problem is I don't have a peaceful mind. My problem is I'm not calm. My problem is I'm not open to the facts of that life is sometimes difficult, and I don't want to suffer from it. And this is my own making that I'm making a big issue out of it in my mind about it. That part is of my making. So the integrated part is our part. Now, what happens later with the purification of our thoughts and the purification of our sensations or feelings occurs over the course of time in our bodies. So our bodies are more susceptible to these difficulties that begin to occur. And in my case, for sure, I did not have much practice with resolving them. I drank them away, which is obviously not the right way to go. So I made myself numb to my problems by drinking.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I never learned the right way of doing it. And then when I began to see there was a right way of doing it, even then I was still resistant to a lot of times. And even now I still find myself resistant sometimes. But I have seen the lesson is true. If I will be peaceful, if I will allow myself to recognize that my part is to want to remain peaceful, and then try to extend that, because giving is receiving, then I will be in the right frame of mind for receiving as well as for giving. So, and they are the same. Cause is not really supposed to be separated from effect. And the effects and the effects and the effects and the effects that build up in accumulation are not the cause. So what happened in the past is never the cause of what happens now. Those are all effects. And I can't take the effects of what happened yesterday and the day before that and the day before that and the day before that and allow them to accumulate as if they're the cause of how I feel right now. That's what I do, but that isn't right. What I really need to do is I really need to see I should be cleared of that upset and of my resentments and my belief system that says that I should be angry or that I should be sad or that I should be frustrated or that I should be resentful or that I should be feeling unfairly treated. I need to let go of that because that is the past, and therefore it's only the accumulation of effects. It's not the cause of how I feel right now. The cause of how I feel right now can be cleared of all that. And as we begin to be able to practice this, then we can actually begin to see the higher functioning of healing also, because if we're always in the recognition of truth, then in fact, miracles become we become more aware to the miracles working through us. And so we're more likely to stay peaceful because we can see obviously that extending that peace and that joy and the kindness to others is obviously having an effect in our life, because it is the cause now of our creating a peaceful world in our own minds. And it's in our own minds where we're responsible for it. We're responsible for it, but the Holy Spirit, in the way the Course describes it, the Holy Spirit does the purification for us. In the way that Abraham Hicks describes it, then remaining in the vortex where it's peaceful is the resolution for the manifestation of what you want to attract.
Yeah. So remaining peaceful, but taking action where you can take action.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of what I'm doing. I suppose I created this little process where firstly, see that everything's happening for you. So you've attracted it for some reason, and then find the gift in it, and then seeing that you'll get through it, and again, obviously this is not a small thing. This is not like an earthquake's hit, but it's sort of for anything. Know that you'll get through it, and look for the gift. And so that's kind of my little process I created, because I think everything happens for a reason. Like I've attracted that scenario to myself for some reason. And even though, I can't technically blame myself for the postal service, whether she did or didn't post it, I don't know. She certainly didn't make any amends of the technical issues and the fact that I didn't get the reading at all. She didn't seem to have any. I didn't say to her, well, what are you going to do about it? She just blamed it on technical issues. And so I just didn't get the reading I paid for. And I was going to leave it as well. I thought, oh, well, she'll send me the picture she's created. But really, that's probably not good enough in a sense, to just say, okay, well, technical issues. So, she could say that to everyone and keep taking $300 from people. And, it just doesn't feel in integrity. I didn't get what I. So if it was me as a service person, I would say, well, we've got technical issues. This was like 5 minutes in. Let's reschedule, or something else, or I'll email you the messages or something. We would find a resolution as a service provider to do that, but there wasn't any any conversation around that. It was just technical issues, and that's it. Bad luck, too bad, so sad, and that doesn't feel an integrity, that in itself, in terms of a service, offering a service and being in a spiritual thing as well. It seems even somehow worse, that should be acceptable. So that's where, so I can
the first step in my mind, first step in my mind is let me escape from the dilemma. If there's going to be a dilemma that remains in my mind, then that's going to block me from being peaceful, because a dilemma is exactly what the opposite of peace is. There's no such thing as a dilemma in peacefulness. So first thing I want to do is allow my mind to be cleared of any dilemma. I know there's a solution for this, and my faith says it will happen. But in fact, my faith doesn't come first. Escaping from my fear comes first. So my fear is that I'm being used improperly, that I'm going to have to suffer because of it, and that in fact I might have lost money, or I might have lost opportunities, or whatever goes along after that too. So my fear increases with each and every different level or different layer of difficulties that seem to be added on to it. So my first dealing with it then needs to be, let me escape from the fear by looking for peace instead of that.
Yeah, well, that's what I did. I just went, okay, well, I can't, it's her time, do I expect her to give me another hour? And I just thought, okay, well, it is what it is. And I didn't do anything about it. I just went, it is what it is. And then, of course, now we've got the second part, which didn't happen either, which is now it feels like I need to really have conversation and say, this is really not in integrity, and it doesn't feel like that for me or for anyone else. It feels like something, it should be addressed, and so that's how I feel about it now. So yes, I was going to leave it and just go, okay, well, it is what it is. But now I'm communicating and seeing where it's going, and as I say, it hadn't gone anywhere, and then I had to send another email. So it doesn't feel like there is any real real wanting to do anything much about it from her end. So now I feel like it is up to me to do something about it.
Yes. Now, let me just add one thing, Debbie.
Yes.
The last part of this asks us, besides wanting to escape from it and return to peace, let me relinquish the ideas about my protection. So I needn't protect myself from fear or guilt or shame or worries or judgment. I need to protect myself from it. So to be fearless, I needn't protect myself from that. I can be more bold, therefore, also, as you're saying. You can say, there seems to be no integrity here. How can I get my money back, or how can I get the package, or how can I resolve my issue because I didn't get what I wanted and I paid for it. So there, you have a legitimate case still going on here, and you don't need protection from the truth of that. You didn't receive it.
No, I don't need
no
to
record that you
nothing.
received it. In fact, the record says you didn't receive it and it can't be tracked. So so you have every evidence to continue to pursue that you wanted to resolve for you. You don't need protection from saying so.
Right, because it's like, well, should I just let the whole thing go and just forget about it? Which I kind of did until the parcel didn't arrive, and then I don't get anything for $300. It does seem like something I need to follow it up. So, but yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you just applied this to this situation. Thank you for taking that time, and thank you everyone for your patience.
Would you like to read the next part?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Just put my specs back on.
You're doing good reading.
Let me be still and listen to the truth. If you will lay aside the ego's voice, however loudly it may seem to call, if you will not accept its petty gifts that give you nothing that you really want, if you will listen with an open mind that has not told you what salvation is, then you will hear the mighty voice of truth, quiet in power, strong in stillness, and completely certain in its messages. Listen and hear your Father speak to you through his appointed voice, which silences the thunder of the meaningless, yes, and shows the way to peace to those who cannot see. Be still today and listen to the truth. Be not deceived by voices of the dead, which tell you they have found the source of life and offer it to you for your belief. Attend them not, but listen to the truth. Be not afraid today to circumvent the voices of the world. Walk lightly past their meaningless persuasion. Hear them not. Be still today and listen to the truth. Go past all things which do not speak of him who holds your happiness within his hand, held out to you in welcome and in love. Hear only him today and do not wait to reach him longer. Hear one voice today. Today the promise of God's word is kept. Hear and be silent. He would speak to you. He comes with miracles 1,000 times as happy and as wonderful as those you ever dreamed or wished for in your dreams. His miracles are true. They will not fade when dreaming ends. They end the dream instead and last forever, for they come from God to hear his dear Son, whose other name is you. Prepare yourself for miracles today. Today, allow your Father's ancient pledge to you and all your brothers to be kept. Hear him today and listen to the word, which lifts the veil that lies upon the earth and wakes all those who sleep and cannot see. God calls to them through you. He needs your voice to speak to them, for who could reach God's Son except his Father? Calling through yourself. Hear him today and offer him your voice to speak to all the multitude who wait to hear the word that he will speak today. Be ready for salvation. It is here and will today be given unto you, and you will learn your function from the one who chose it in your Father's name for you. Listen today and you will hear a voice which will resound throughout the world through you. The bringer of all miracles has need that you receive them first and thus become the joyous giver of what you received. Thus does salvation start, thus it ends. When everything is yours and everything is given away, it will remain with you forever, and the lesson has been learned.
Thank you, Debbie. And so I'm pointing out today about the interlocking chain of miracles is on my mind for next week to talk about it more so next week than this week. But this week, I also want to point out that many of these lessons from the workbook, many of them do bring to us something of great value. And so as you go through the workbook, if you're doing the daily lessons, or even just if you're doing one or two every once in a while or whatever, when you see some of the workbook lessons that really speak to you and really change your mind about what in fact that you've seen in the past, and now your perceptions begin to change towards being more miracly oriented, towards seeing the interlocking chain of miracles in your mind now, instead of the chain of misperceptions. As you begin to see the interlocking chain of miracles, now pay attention also to the facts of which ones of these exercises seem to open that to your mind. The prayers, in my opinion, the last part of, from around 220 onwards in the workbook, they're mostly those prayers like I read usually at the beginnings of our meetings. And then these, though, are also just really fantastic little, mind-opening opportunities too, see? So I'm not able to save myself. No matter how strong I am and no matter how much that's increasing, I'm still not really able to save myself. Salvation comes to me through this process. And this process then awakens in me this interlocking chain of miracles in which I can be remaining miracle-mindedness, not needing to select them to say, oh, here comes your cab because I'm flagging it down in my mind or something like that. It's not like that. No, it's peacefully allowing myself to simply give what I'm receiving, give the simplicity of what I'm receiving, the peace and the joy and the kindness that I'm receiving is what I want to be giving. That opens my mind to the interlocking chain of miracles so that I can remain miracle-mindedness and therefore peaceful, and therefore seeing miracles, even in little things, even in small things sometimes, things that people wouldn't say, oh, that's a miracle. Well, it is a miracle in another case. And if I showed you the worst case scenario about how that would happen instead of something else, you would say, oh, that is a miracle. But you wouldn't say it in the case of where it seems to just seamlessly fit in. And that's how many miracles are just seamlessly fit in. Many miracles are not astounding, and we don't go like, oh my God, look, you see that guy came out of the grave, he's alive. That's incredible. We're not going to necessarily see that, but we're going to see something that is just as incredible, because all miracles are actually incredible, because it's the life in this peacefulness that in fact is what we're really noticing. We're really noticing somebody that lives in peace and is able to extend that peace in his life with others, as he's interacting with others. And therefore, his life has substantially changed and becomes a miracle. And that's how I would classify many people who have come to the programs, for example, in AA. I've seen a lot of them when they came in, and they look pretty, they look pretty disastrously, and their lives were full of disaster. And then I see them a year later, and 2 years later, and 3 years later, and 4 years later, and so on and so forth. And there's that growth that's occurring in them, and we can actually see the miracle in them over the course of time. And that's how normally we perceive miracles, is over the course of time. And so they don't just stand out like somebody just jumped up off of the dead zone and into the life, not like that. But we see something miraculous still that occurs as people's personalities heal, and as their faith heals, and as their choices begin to become right-minded instead of the crazy stuff that they were doing previous to that. And that's a miracle.
Amazing, Eric.
Yes, that is a miracle.
Eric, when you talk about people's personalities healing, would you also mean post-traumatic stress, PTSD?
Yes, a lot of people suffer from, now they have a new way of looking at post-traumatic stress, and they call it complex post-traumatic stress. Yes. And because people tend to be triggered, in a sense, they used to call it being triggered. Now they call it deregulated, I believe is how they're really referring to it now.
Dysregulation. Dysregulated,
yes, dysregulated, that's it. And in order to get re-regulated, or to be restored again to peacefulness, then is a choice. Well, I don't seem to be able to make the choice when I'm dysregulated. And this is the same thing that Course in Miracles is teaching us, is that's right. When we're not peaceful, it's because we're weakened. Our mind is weakened, and it can't make the right choices. Because our mind is weakened, it's susceptible now to confusion, conflict, and contradictions. And that's all it seems to see, because that's what it's very susceptible to. That's what it now starts to believe in, because it doesn't believe anymore in faith and miracles and love and kindness. It doesn't believe in that because it lost it itself. So because the mind did lose it, in terms of it believes in a lack about it now, we really can't necessarily lose love, because love is always there. We really can't necessarily lose peace, because peace is always there. When it's restored in my mind, it's like it's always been there. It's like I now I see clearly to myself, I'm the one that chose to see things so upsettingly. I'm the one that was carrying on to make things more out of it than it really amounts to. And I'm the one that's suffering from it for days and weeks instead of for a minute or so. So yes, in the world, it's very difficult to be perfect, almost impossible. And it's very difficult to do everything right, almost impossible. But we can allow ourselves to be corrected by this spiritual process where we say to ourselves, I prefer peace instead of that craziness and upset that goes along with being out of control. And this dysregulation, I got to write that down, dysregulation. Yeah, yes, dysregulation is that sort of thing, is I've lost control of myself. Now my physiological needs and my safety needs and my belongingness needs are spinning out of control. I don't seem to have any safety. I don't seem to have any security. I don't seem to have any peace in my mind. I don't seem to have any belongingness here. I seem to be like I'm all alone now, isolated by myself, suffering and having to carry on in this suffering. That's the weakness of the mind, is all that really is. It's just the weakness of the mind. My mind can be strengthened by realizing that there is still peace. There is still love in the world. There is still kindness. And my mind can be strengthened by, this is what I want to return to. And if I will be giving of that, then also I will see the receiving of it also. Now, when time with things happen, not necessarily just right close to each other sometimes. Sometimes the acts that I do today don't seem to have benefits until a week from now, or a month from now, or a year from now, or whatever. And you may remember sometimes when you thought to yourself, like, I just can't seem to get this right, or whatever like that. And it went on for days or weeks. And then later on, after you had finally seen what really was going on, was you're blocking yourself from the simplicity of it. And you saw the simplicity of it. Then the next time it happened, it was, oh, that's simple. I know how to deal with that. And it hardly even set you off at all. So dysregulation, I think, is the same sort of thing. It's not by choice so much, but unconsciously, I'm associating with that behavior which doesn't work, with those sufferings which don't work. And therefore, because I have that victim in my mind, I also have that victimizer in my mind. And that victimizer is completely always telling me how much of a victim I am and how much I'm suffering and how horrible this is and what they're doing to me and why don't they pitch in and do their part and all that kind of stuff comes out with my suffering, because the victimizer is there to egg me on and say, yes, you are suffering, you poor bastard. Nobody cares about you. And it's right there coaching me to be feeling bad about myself.
So Eric, along that, then there's another step. So there was a situation, and I recognized it as something that I dealt with, something that was complex post-traumatic stress for me, but I used the course and I didn't react. I stayed at peace. I didn't blame this person for my troubles. But I'm missing a piece, because very recently I had a dream about the same situation. And back in the actual event, that should have been triggering, but wasn't. I walked away from it I thought very well. But recently I had a dream about it, in which the dream was so intense and so angry making, and so that I grinded my teeth so hard that for a week I couldn't eat, because on one side of my mouth, because the pain over there was so intense, and that had to calm down. And I didn't have my night guard with me, so I just grinded my teeth to the point one of them was loose. And I realized I'm missing a component. Yes, when the event occurred, I stayed at peace. I didn't blame him. I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't see him as a victimizer. But something's missing, because here it is again in my dream. And I don't know.
The victimizer is in our own mind with us.
I still don't see him as a victim. I see
our victimizer is in our mind and brings up the problem over and over again. So if I don't believe that the problem can be resolved with so-and-so, and I withdraw from trying to resolve it with so-and-so, so he's not victimizing me anymore. And I can see that. And I can just I realize if I get into it with him, it's going to go still badly, probably, because I don't really know how to bring it up with him, because every time we do that, he just starts up with the same old thing again. So I'm not going to do that. So I can see that I'm not going to do it. And I don't feel bad about that. But then you say to yourself, now, do I feel bad about that still? And you wonder to yourself, like, do I still feel upset about that I can't actually resolve it with him? Because there is a component to us, there's something, it briefly mentioned it here, that back in the second chapter, we talked about the separation, in terms of that there were 4 ego concepts. And I'm not going to review them again today, but if you go back to the chapter 2, the first section, you'll see that it talked about the 4 ego concepts. And that's the thing, is that we're making ourselves responsible to make the world perfect. And when we don't realize that unconscious programming is still there, that, I wasn't able to fix so-and-so, but you know what? That means I can't see so-and-so, and it still presents a dilemma for us, or some kind of ongoing problem. Like every time I see so-and-so, I have to just shut up, or whatever is still in my mind, still festering over so-and-so, because so-and-so is out of control, and so on and so forth. Well, they do contribute to our problems, that's for sure. But they're not really the cause of this problem, because the victimizer wants to wake up in our mind whenever the victim does. So anytime that the victim comes up in our mind, even if it's unconscious and we're not completely aware of it, when it does come up in our mind, so does the victimizer come up in our mind. And it doesn't have to be associated with the person that caused the problem in our mind, but now it becomes more and more and more, it will become associated with other people like that, or with other situations like that, or with other opportunities for suffering instead of peace. So it takes a bit more of prayer, and it takes a bit more of realizing there's an unconscious aspect of myself which still believes that I can fix this.
Made me wonder if I
have to fix it. I just have to be peaceful. That's all I really have to do. I don't have to fix it, but I have to be peaceful enough that I can see myself extending peace to these people that seem, well, maybe not them, but to people in general. let me at least extend peace to everyone else, at least.
I can't extend peace to him. I never want, what I determined after July, the event, was that I'm never going to see him again, ever. And
There
I
is a little
decided,
extra part to this. There's an extra little part to this, and I know that it doesn't get covered in Course in Miracles, but Eric, you'll understand. In terms of energy just wants to complete itself, and so if we can't complete that energetically with a person, it'll come up in our dreams. It'll come up because it needs to, because energy needs to complete itself. That's all energy wants to do, and that's why it'll manifest the way it does. Because if you can't get physical resolution, it'll come up in another way because it needs to complete itself. That's what energy requires. That's just a metaphysical law, and that's quite a common thing to happen, Robin. That's why I wanted to mention it. Otherwise, I wouldn't say anything. But it's quite common that it manifests in dreams because it needs to complete itself somehow. Because it has to go somewhere. It can't just be remaining as an open energy. That's just energy, the law of energy.
Yeah,
and Debbie, that makes so much sense to me.
Good. I'm going to suggest that you do things like this last paragraph that shows here. Okay. So you see the meditation and allow yourself to meditate on what it's telling you, that you're not responsible for your salvation, that you're responsible only to see opportunities to be peaceful and calm and relaxed and receive what God has for you, the peacefulness and the joy and the kindness that he has for you, to receive it. So as you receive it, then you're only responsible therefore to extend it to others. Your choice is to extend it to others, or your choice doesn't have to be to stay in terms of who's there in front of you. If in fact you see somebody that you feel uncomfortable with, then go and meditate again, go and pray again and say the prayer over again. So you can see the release of that suffering, because you don't want to hold on to any of that suffering. When you decide that you're not going to speak to somebody, or so-and-so is, going to continue to do what they do, when you decide that in peace, that you can be removed.
I did, right?
So your suffering and your struggle goes away, but you have to continue it, because in fact, when it does arise again and you find yourself attached to it again, even loosely, because of something else perhaps that happens, but then that seems to come to mind again, that person seems to come to mind again. So you see there's still a loose attachment to that person who now plays the victimizer in your head to fill that role of the victimizer that's in your mind. Whenever we have a victim in our mind, we do have also the victimizer in our mind. It may have the face of somebody else, or it may not have the face of somebody else. It might just be festering, kind of suffering, instead of actually having a face to put onto it. So we have to allow ourselves to come to peace about resolving the suffering. We don't have to resolve suffering. We simply have to be willing to be released from it. That's what we bring to the altar. I don't know how to let go of my suffering. Help me to let go of my suffering. I see no point to continuing to suffer over whatever it is I'm suffering for. And I can't even see what it is right now. I'm not even sure why I'm suffering. I don't even really want to suffer, though. And I really want to see a better way to resolve my problems than that. And so I really would like to read some workbook exercises where it tells me about what to concentrate on instead of that. Or I would like to do the dishes because it keeps my mind occupied when I'm doing dishes or whatever. But I want to be removed from the victimizer who tells me that I have to resolve that problem, because I can't. It's not my place to try and resolve that.
I guess my concern, Eric, is I don't want to use this course to just, I guess, maybe as Debbie said, just deny the into energy, or just to tamp down my feelings and pretend everything is okay. Or I don't want to use the course wrong. And
the world outside ourselves is empty without us to give it life in our minds. It's empty without us. It wouldn't be there if we didn't have a mind that's set on looking at it and observing it and being part of it. It wouldn't be there in our minds if it weren't there in our minds already. So it's there in our minds already. So we can't really remove it, but we can be removed from the obligations that we think that we have to fix it. It's not ours to fix because it's disconnected and doesn't really exist, because it's all past. And it's difficult to see this, that the world is completely past, that the entire universe has already happened is difficult to see. But
You're
every
saying
time that
take
we
this
do
to a
see it,
metaphysical level.
yes, that's right. Every time that we do see it, and every time that we do seem to experience it, it is already past. And so we need to be allowing ourselves to see the enjoyment of being in the present. And this is where the people like Eckhart Tolle
But there's
sometimes
the
make
two parts. There's the two parts, though. There's the transpersonal, which is what we're doing here, and there's also the personal. We need both dimensions. We need both the vertical and the horizontal dimensions. We need to have them. We need both of those integrated. And the personal dimension is about things come up, we embrace them, witness them, see them, hear them, welcome them, honor them, so they can be let go. And that's the completion. So anything that comes up, anytime there's any animosity, ill will, anything at all, we don't judge it. We don't pretend it's not there. We don't intellectualize it. We allow it and embrace it and love it and welcome it. I say, if something comes, I say, sadness, you're welcome here. And that's what it's just wanting. It's just wanting to complete itself and be acknowledged and heard and seen, so it can then just transmute back to the light, and it's released. And that's where it feels like there's some resistance around that, because there's no releasing opportunity. It's because you're trying to do this in a way that's purely intellectual in a sense. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, obviously our heart comes into it, but yes, the emotional realm, because we're energy fields. We have 7 energy fields around us, and there's the mental realm, and there is the emotional realm. Obviously, there's all those other realms: the physical, the astral, the causal, etc. But yes, the emotional realm and the mental realm are 2 different fields within our auric field. You know, we have 7 fields, so we do need to acknowledge that the emotional aspect, which will be obviously mental and emotional. You know, it's a cascade. It's like 3 legs on a tripod. You know, the breath, the thoughts, the emotions, the reactions, the behaviors all go together. But so anything that comes up, just really, it's about honoring it, whether it be fear, whether it be sadness, whatever it is, because it just wants to be seen. That's all. It just wants to be seen and acknowledged, even if it seems to be about someone else and what they did to us. It's, as Eric said earlier, you know, it's really us. It's really, you know, how we're perceiving it, our internal oppressor. You know, we become the oppressed. You know, initially someone else can do something to us, and then we internalize it, and then it's internalized oppression. So we become the oppressor, i.e. the victimizer of our own. So, but we need to acknowledge, just love it, like really just love it, so it can complete, it can be seen and heard. Otherwise it will remain in the subconscious and continue to come up in our dreams and come up in ways that has to, because it has to release, it needs to complete. And that's what energy, it's just energy.
It felt like that, Debbie.
Yeah.
It felt like I needed to do something to
let. Yes. You just need to acknowledge it. Just acknowledge it and love it and witness it and honor it, and just not judge it. Just love it. Love it all. Because it is actually all love. Eric, I mean, everything Eric's saying is correct. It's just sometimes, you know, but we are human beings. The physical aspect can easily be ignored, as if, you know, it doesn't need, you know, we can just pretend it's not there, or, you know, just, you know, it'll just disappear, you know, if we, you know, but yes, just allow everything, and just know that it's just about energy wanting to complete. It just wants to be loved and heard and seen and witnessed. And when we're not taught this stuff, and so it really is, you know, it's not something that's, I was started to write a book for schools about it, really, for kids, because, you know, we don't get taught this. We're just taught to be happy all the time and peaceful, and ignore the other emotions that aren't necessarily considered acceptable. But it's all of us. We love all of our bits as much as we possibly can. And then it will just go. That's all it wants. Just wants to be acknowledged and witnessed and heard.
Let's go on. We're going to look at the 4 concepts of the ego that I mentioned from chapter 2, very much in brief here, but we'll see that all distortions in some way have to be resolved. Either we allow ourselves to release from them because we're bound to them, we're attached to the idea of fixing things, making things right. Either we let go of that as the suffering that we don't need to suffer because we can't fix the world outside ourselves. It is disconnected from us. Or we allow ourselves to simply see the truth as we're saying here is that doesn't really fit with me, as Debbie's more or less saying. I acknowledge that I thought that. I acknowledge that I was worried about that. I acknowledge that that happened. However, I feel, in fact, now that I see there's nothing for me to do to try and resolve it because it's not my mind to control. It isn't happening anymore, and I let it go that way. So I let it go because I see the past, and I see the past as an opportunity now to see my neutrality, because in my neutrality, after the fact, I feel and I can see, in fact, that I have no responsibility to go and try and do something about what seemingly happened in the past. And I can let go of it that way. So there's many ways to let go of things in terms of how to release ourselves from suffering. But in fact, if we release ourselves from the concept of suffering, then in fact, it's going to make it a little easier. And here's the concepts that are all behind all suffering. So there's only 4 of them that are mentioned in the Course in Miracles. They may be mentioned in other ways, in other courses, or by other people in different ways. And so their number of them might seem to vary. But in terms of how that always occurs, there's a simple process which causes all of our difficulties to mount up and accumulate in our minds in order to destroy our peace, or in order to block us from actually seeing the truth about it, that peace can't be destroyed. So, Robin, if you'd like to, maybe you'd like to read this section here.
I would love to, but Eric, my dog is standing behind me insisting that she have a potty break. I'm so sorry.
You better
I need,
Go ahead.
I know.
Come
I need 15
when you can,
minutes.
okay?
I'm coming back in 15 or so. I'll be
Give her a
sorry.
break. Yes, we'll go over it another
Sorry.
time, no problem.
I'll read
Perfectly
Eric.
fine, don't worry about it. Would somebody else like to read this section? Ego
Yeah,
concept.
I'll read Eric.
Thank you, Sheila.
Ego concepts. The origins of separation to extend is a fundamental aspect of God, which he gave to his son. In the creation, God extended himself to his creations and imbued them with the same loving will to create. You have not only been fully created, but have also been created perfect. There is no emptiness in you. Because of your likeness to your creator, you are creative. No child of God can lose this ability because it is inherent in what he is, but he can use it inappropriately by projecting. The inappropriate use of extension or projection occurs when you believe that some emptiness or lack exists in you, and that you can fill it with your own ideas instead of truth. This process involves the following steps. First, you believe that what God created can be changed by your own mind. Second, you believe that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking. Third, you believe that you can distort the creations of God, including yourself. Fourth, you can believe that you can create yourself and that the direction of your own creation is up to you. These related distortions represent a picture of what actually occurred in the separation, or the detour into fear. None of this existed before the separation, nor does it actually exist now. Everything God created is like him. Extension, as undertaken by God, is similar to the inner radiance that the children of the Father inherit from him. Its real source is internal. This is as true of the Son as of the Father. In this sense, the creation includes both the creation of the Son by God and the Son's creations when his mind is healed. This requires God's endowment of the Son with free will, because all loving creation is freely given in one continuous line, in which all aspects are of the same order. The Garden of Eden, or the pre-separation condition, was a state of mind in which nothing was needed. When Adam listened to the lies of the serpent, all he heard was untruth. You do not have to continue to disbelieve what is not true unless you choose to do so. All that can literally disappear in the twinkling of an eye, because it is merely a misperception, What is seen in dreams seems to be very real. Yet the Bible says that a deep sleep fell upon Adam, and nowhere is there reference to his waking up. The world has not yet experienced any comprehensive reawakening or rebirth. Such a rebirth is impossible as long as you continue to project or miscreate. It still remains within you, however, to extend as God extended his spirit to you. In reality, this is your only choice, because your free will was given you for your joy in creating the perfect. All fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that you have the ability to usurp the power of God.
Thank you, Sheila. So we see here, again, this summarization helps a lot, because we see that we must have a rebirth when we are suffering. So the first part of it is to recognize that suffering always weakens us. It weakens our mind so that our mind suffers from contradictions, confusion, and from the idea that something else is the cause of our problems. So we begin to suffer because of the mind being weakened by the beliefs that it has, as that something that isn't real anymore is causing it pain and suffering and weakness. So we find that it's in the world outside ourselves that this is where it seems to have happened. And we begin to suffer from it, believing that that's the case, because I was shy and somebody treated me incorrectly because of being shy, or I was mad and somebody treated me incorrectly because I was mad, or I was unhappy and somebody treated me unfairly because I was unhappy, or I was diligent and I did all my work and somebody wasn't happy with me about it because they saw something else that didn't get done by somebody else or whatever, and they blamed it on me just equally with everybody else, and so I feel unfairly treated. So there's many opportunities for us to need this rebirth. There must be a reversal that occurs at the mind level, in which we're open to the fact of that all of whatever's outside of me has nothing to do with my recovery right now. And it's in my recovery right now where I must choose more correctly, because if I don't, then I'm going to continue to suffer from what seems to have been bothering me, and what brought me to this place of realizing that I need this time of mindfulness, and I need this time for recovery, and I need this time for meditation and prayer for me to be able to recover. And so I'm going to take this time with meditation and with prayer and with remembering the things that I've been taught, whether it's the 12 steps, or whether it's a Course in Miracles, or whether it's the 4 Agreements, or whether it's Eckhart Tolle's The Presence of Now. I'm going to allow myself to remember that there are ways to recover. And besides the ways of remembering recovering, I'm going to fully desire that, because I know, in fact, that I can recover, because I've been through this before. And I know that there's no difficulty that's so insurmountable that it's going to kill me unless it kills me. And so therefore, I don't feel threatened right now. I feel that I can take my time to return to peacefulness. And if I like music, to do so, if I like guided meditations, to do so, if I like prayer, to do so, if I like calling my friend that always helps me out with things, whatever way works for me, that's the way that I go about starting out. And I continue at it until I receive the miracle mindedness, which is the release of that suffering. The beginning of the healing is in the release of that suffering. And then miracle mindedness can occur to me. And that's the strengthening of my mind. The strengthening of my mind to see that what I was upset about isn't what's so important as what I can choose to do instead, or choose to see it instead in a different way. And I begin to see the strengthening of my mind. And in seeing the strengthening of my mind, I allow myself to remember the strengthening must increase. That's the way of God's will. God's creating, which is always increasing, is what I need to be seeing for myself, because that's what he wants for me. He wants me to see my peacefulness, my calm, my relaxed presence with others. He wants to see that increasing, because that's what he's giving to me. He's giving me all of himself in that way, so that I can remember this, even in fact of that I completely have forgotten him, even in fact of that I can't see him, even in fact that I can't directly relate to him, and he can't directly relate to me, even that there seems to be only this process that I can relate to. But I can relate to the process, and I do see and value the process because it has always worked in the past. And so I continue to invest myself in it, and therefore to increase the recognition of the truth in my mind, and therefore to increase the recognition of spirituality in my mind, and therefore to increase the ability to come back to peace and to extend peace to others. And it says right here that when we do find out that we can return to this peacefulness, that in fact we do need to extend, just like he extended to us, we do need to extend to others. God extended to his spirit to you, and you must extend that spirit to others in order for you to feel like you're keeping it, or not just keeping it, but to feel like you're strengthening, because that's the real objective here, is to strengthen in way of creating, like God is creating peace and joy and kindness. That's his way. And so when we do that, we're increasing that in our mind, and therefore increasing opportunities for us to remain in this peacefulness, and therefore to recognize it more so, and therefore not to do that other thing, which we were talking about just a little while ago, where people suffer from conditions, and then they begin to disassemble in their mind. They begin to, return to the confusion and the chaos and the difficulties of seeing others as their problems, as seeing situations and circumstances and people as that's what my problem is. That isn't what our problem is. Our problem is mostly only in our own mind. It does have a little bit to do with how we relate to others, that's for sure. And so they're involved in it, but it has more to do with how we choose to relate to others than it has to do with the fact of that we have to relate to others in such a way as that we're not peaceful. We should be able to relate to others as we're peaceful, and we should be able to maintain our peacefulness when we do so. And therefore, we should be able to extend that to others, even when it seems that there's some difficulty. When it does seem too difficult, then my mind is too weak, and it's becoming confused, and it's becoming disoriented, and it's becoming chaotic, and I need to withdraw from that, like step 10 tells me to do. And I need to take a look at it and to be introspective at that moment, to realize that I can choose something different. I don't have to choose to be upset, angry, frustrated, bitter, and resentful. I can instead choose to be peaceful and relaxed and calm, return to prayer and meditation, return to beautiful music, or return to doing things like washing the dishes, just make my mind busy with something until I can return to peace. And then when I can return to peace, I can start to remember that, in fact, that's what fills that empty space. As long as I can recognize the gap there that says, oh, I have an emptiness, fill me with your peace. As long as I can recognize the gap, and as long as I can ask for the increasing of peace in my mind, then I'm doing the right thing. Even if I don't entirely experience it at the moment, I can still remember it, that actually works. And so therefore I can continue in this process. Some problems will seem more difficult than others. Some will really seem very difficult. I read stories about, Senator McCain, and he was a prisoner of war. And I can't imagine having lived through that situation that he lived through. And I read situations, read about other people that suffered from some great horrible thing. And I just can't imagine what must be like to have to go through that day after day after day of suffering. And there's people in the world today that I see in the news and so on and so forth, where it's continual suffering. People are trying to migrate from down in South America and come up to America because they believe it'll be better here for them. And they're coming up by the thousands, 20,000 of them, 15,000 or whatever. It's like, we can't take 10,000 people a day into America. It doesn't work that way. So we see there's lots of problems in the world. There's lots of suffering because of the problems in the world. It does seem like there's a lack of comfort and peace and joy and food and warmth and shelter. It seems like there's a lot of lack in the world. So in fact, there's going to seem to be problems in the world. We're not trying to pretend that there isn't problems. We may not get our mail today. We may not get our food today. Things can happen. Shortages can occur. Lack can happen in the world, that's for sure. But the way to recover from it is always the same, is to remember the strengthening of myself is in my mind when my mind is peaceful, when my mind is calm, and when my mind can choose to remain in the present, no matter what seems to be going on. then I can establish that freedom to use my strength in order to help myself and others. And in doing so, I can continue to strengthen myself and be aware of strengthening myself is the way of the creating, is the way of the Father. He extends himself to his Son just like he extends himself to us. Does that make sense? All fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that we have the ability to usurp the power of God. In other words, that we have the ability to live without him. That's all that really means to me, that I think I have the ability to live without God. So I don't think that, because in fact, I've seen, in fact, that that can't be true. I have the ability to live with God, and that's what strengthens me.
Yeah. But when, Eric, when you're in the, so, because you've been doing this a long time, and, we've all been perhaps doing different practices a long time. So we rewire, those neurobiological pathways that allow us for, to have more uplifting, inspired choices. But when, as you know, with the law of possibilities, when you're in a space of, anger or shame or guilt, the lower vibrational emotions, and then the field of possibilities, the only field of possibilities open to a person then, unless they've developed a structure for themselves that has become familiar, like a course or another kind of practice that's become a bit entrenched enough that they can remember, oh, I've got choice here. I can choose peace, or I can. So the field of possibilities, generally speaking, they can't access the joy and the love and the inspiration, the higher, the higher vibrational options in the field of possibilities when they're immersed in anger, shame, guilt, hatred, ill will, because they haven't developed. What does they haven't developed? Of course, we're human. We can all go there, but because we've become, we've cultivated, we can quickly come back to peace, or quickly, recognize, oh, there goes my mind, or, we can quickly become back to our observer space and our true self and see that it's a personality that's, but ordinarily this stuff is not easy in the beginnings, because people don't have they haven't cultivated enough to reach for the higher vibrational field of possibilities of peace, and because they haven't cultivated it. So it can seem commonsensical, and it can seem easy to do, but it's as we know, as we all know, when we as we're stepping on this path. Yes. It is about doing things over and over and over again.
Yes. When we try to do the part that brings the peace to our mind, then we, in fact, have jumped ahead of ourselves. So that's what you're really saying. You're really saying, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, because I know that the source of peace is somewhere beyond the upset, somewhere beyond the frustration, somewhere beyond the chaos and confusion that's in my mind. And you're absolutely right about that, 100%. It's very difficult for us to receive that peace when, in fact, we're suffering still. Absolutely, you're right, Debbie, 100%. We have to allow ourselves to escape from the suffering. We have to have a routine that says, okay, suffering comes along sometimes. Yeah. And because it does, I have to allow myself the leeway to be able to recover from it. And the more quickly that I can means the more practiced that I am at that. Mm-hmm. Practiced more. Absolutely. So, as you say, it's true. I am practiced at being able to let go of the difficulties. Seeing my failure from the past still comes to my mind sometime, and seeing it still brings with it a distaste, a disdain. It brings to my mind still something I don't want, something I don't like. Comes to my mind, and I let it go in the realization of that that will only weaken me. To allow myself to be used by those thoughts will only weaken me. Those thoughts are thoughts that I'm being thought by those thoughts. I'm not thinking those thoughts. They arrive because they're thinking me. I'm not thinking them. So I can see that I can let them go because I don't want to think them. I can see that they thought me, and I can let it go because I don't have to follow the fact that I've been thought about. I've been thought about by I don't know what. But it isn't real, because whatever thinks about us in terms of nastiness, in terms of suffering and so on and so forth, what thinks about us that way is not what truly we want and truly we are. We need to let go of that.
Yeah. And you know, Eric, it's not always even us, you know, it can be the unconscious collective. I mean, our ancestral DNA, like, you know, we carry a lot, you know, our thoughts aren't even always ours half the time. Like,
you bring up a lot of good points, and that's true, because there does seem to be a sort of a morphic field or sort of a collective consciousness or something like that, where we have, you know, sort of rules about these things. Oh, you can't just forgive what happened. You have to actually do something about it. You have to pay them what they lost, or you have to, you know, make good on your promises, or you have to, you know, you have to go back and offer them something from what you took from them or whatever. And see, all these things are not untrue at all. So in fact, they do seem to also visit us too. And the same thing goes with them. When we see our true responsibilities, then we do have to live up to those true responsibilities. And that does take courage. Sometimes it takes going to be in this practice, though, for a little longer, so we can be strengthened for the fact of what we need to do. Sometimes we're not really ready to do what it is that we need to do. When I first came to AA, that's what happened to me. The first time I came into the program in AA, I was really not ready for facing my past. And so therefore, I really didn't want to do it. And so therefore, I really wanted to escape from that instead of escape from my pain of drinking. And so I went back out and drank again. And then I learned the real lesson of drinking is like, I wasn't near as bad as I was like, it was nothing compared to later. 4 years later, when I came back to AA, I was practically dead.
Wow.
In 4 years, I practically killed myself. And I was hardly even, you know, really drinking seriously for very long before that. And it wasn't so bad. Oh, but then it was, you know, suddenly there was symptoms involved with it. Suddenly my heart was racing, my brain was being fried, my liver was getting sick, you know. Suddenly I was really poisoned. So
it's an incredible
I wasn't ready
miracle,
for
Eric.
one thing, but I thought I wasn't ready for that one thing. And then when I saw how it's much easier actually to face that than it is to face what drinking did to me after that. But I didn't know that then, and I wasn't ready for that then. And so I needed to suffer more. When I was willing to let go of the suffering, believe me, I started to learn about letting go of the suffering. Still took a long time, though. Took a lot of practice.
It's incredible. It's an incredible story, and you are amazingly walking miracle. And look at the difference you're making to the world, Eric. That is just so phenomenal. And just what you said before about how you are witnessing the growth of others. You know, that's just such a beautiful gift, isn't it? It's such an honoring of you as well.
It really is. Yeah, it really is
beautiful. That's so lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. So anybody else? We have a couple more parts here. We have page 4, 5, and 6 still, and we have 3 more parts here that are really interesting. But this part here is the part that we talked about. After chapter 9, you may remember I introduced this idea of having the kind of day that we want. And we talked about decision making, and this is the same thing, just reviewed a little differently, because we do need to keep in mind that making decisions, we have to use the process. Now, the process doesn't have to be exactly from A Course in Miracles, because I know other people are doing other things with me. We see that the 4 Agreements works, master yourself, and all so on and so forth. We see that works just as easily as the Course in Miracles does. We see that I work with some people that are learning to be Buddhists, and they like Buddhism, and they do things with me, and even so, they don't care about A Course in Miracles, and they don't care about the 4 Agreements. They like Buddhism. And it's perfectly fine, because they're finding the peacefulness and the strengthening of their mind in practicing what they practice. So that's the idea here, is watching every decision we make for the purpose of practicing what it is we need to practice. And so if somebody would like to read, Watch Every Decision.
I don't know who's here, Eric. I can't see anyone else, so I'm happy to read. But if someone else is there and wants to, please, go, because I didn't even know you were here, Sheila. I don't see anyone. So
yeah, Mary's here.
I'm on my phone.
Sheila's here, and Robin's back, and also, whoops, no, she's not here. I was going to say, that's it right now. No, wait, there's somebody else here. Wait. Danielle's here also, but she's invisible and she can't speak.
Okay.
I don't mind.
So-
She's not really invisible. I mean, she's not shown on her camera.
Thank you, Sheila. Please go. I'll mute
She can't
myself
speak
now.
today, though. So who would like to read watch every decision, please?
Watch every decision. Decisions are continuous. You do not always know when you are making them, but with a little practice with the ones you recognize, a set begins to form which sees you through the rest. It is not wise to let yourself become preoccupied with every step you take. The proper set, adopted consciously each time you wake, will put you well ahead. And if you find resistance strong and dedication weak, you are not ready. Do not fight yourself, but think about the kind of day you want and tell yourself there is a way in which this very day can happen just like that. Then try again to have the day you want. 1, the outlook starts with this: today I will make no decisions by myself. This means that you are choosing not to be the judge of what to do. But it must also mean you will not judge the situations where you will be called upon to make response. For if you judge them, you have set the rules for how you should react to them. And then another answer cannot but produce confusion and uncertainty and fear. This is your major problem now. You still make up your minds and then decide to ask what you should do. And what you hear may not resolve the problem as you saw it first. This leads to fear because it contradicts what you perceive. And so you feel attacked and therefore angry. There are rules by which this will not happen, but it does occur at first to everyone who listens well.
So this is a problem that we find over and over and over again. We don't realize that we judge of what to do before, in fact, we come to peaceful, calm, relaxed, healing, and joy in our hearts. We don't have that when we judge what to do. Here, the Course in Miracles is saying, well, don't do that. Follow the rules. The rule says that we need to come to peace and forgiveness in our hearts, so there's no grudges and nothing held against anyone in our minds. And then we can judge what to do, because it will be shown to us. We won't actually have to judge what's real and what's true and what to do, because parts of that will be shown to us. So it will seem natural, it will seem peaceful, it will seem easy, because in fact, we allow ourselves to be peaceful and calm and still before we decide what to do. So we don't decide by ourselves. In other words, we decide in the spirit of the release of all suffering and the acceptance of all healing, which is always peaceful and still and kind and loving. This is where we then can make the right decisions. And they seem to come natural then.
2, throughout the day, at any time you think of it and have a quiet moment for reflection, tell yourself again the kind of day you want, the feelings you would have, the things you want to happen, and the things you would experience.
So this is the use of the memory for the positive usefulness of it, which is to remember, to recognize the truth as the truth unfolds from what has happened. There's going to be still a truth. And what has happened, when we see the truth about it, then we see the peacefulness of accepting that there is a truth about it. So we see the correction of our mind, not to be confused, not to be chaotic, not to be controlled by being thought by it, instead of that things are chaotic, that things in fact can be peaceful. To realize the truth of it is that I'm not using my mind correctly and I'm not using my memory correctly when I'm suffering.
3, remember once again the day you want and recognize that something has occurred which is not part of it. Then realize that you have asked a question by yourself and must have said an answer in your terms.
And then I can relax and peacefully accept what can happen more naturally, because as I become more calm and relaxed and peaceful, then things do come to my mind, which are much more natural and much more peaceful and much more calming also.
4, if you are so unwilling to receive, you cannot let your question go. You can begin to change your mind with this. At least I can decide I do not like what I feel now. This much is obvious and paves the way for the next easy step, which follows like this.
And that's like bringing the thing to the altar, like we were talking about earlier. I know there's a peaceful place within myself. And when I bring this problem and this difficulty and this frustration and this worry, when I bring it into this peaceful place that I call the altar within myself, or this central aligning place that I call the peaceful place within myself, whatever way I refer to it, I know it's there. And so I bring all of my problems to that place. And I lay down the suffering, I lay down the worries, and I lay down the frustrations. And in doing so, I begin to remember that I will receive peace in exchange for that. And then in exchange, as I do receive peace, healing thoughts and natural loving kindness thoughts will occur to me, because I won't be thought by them, but then I will be actually thinking in alignment with God's will. And so I will be actually then, as part of God's will, then I will be part of the creating then of peace and joy and kindness. And that's what I can then extend to the world. And that's the wonderful experience then of, seeing that about others. When we see it about others, because of their recovery, because of their, becoming stronger, and we see their mind has become stronger, and we see that we can value that because that's what we want also. That's what I'm talking about. We begin to see that what we want is clear to us now. We don't want to suffer. We want to see instead this peaceful, relaxed, comfortable faith within ourselves to realize that all problems can be resolved in this altar where peace can replace that. Not outside in the world first, not out there first, no. In the mind, in peace, then thoughts will occur that can help us in the world as well. And miracles, we'll talk about it a little bit more next week, but that interlocking chain of miracles can then be awakened in our mind. And we'll see the value of that more next week as we talk about that more next week. We're on 5, I think.
Yep, 5, having decided that you do not like the way you feel, what could be easier than to continue with, and so I hope I have been wrong. This works against the sense of opposition and reminds you that help is not being thrust upon you, but is something that you want and that you need because you do not like the way you feel. This tiny opening will be enough to let you go ahead with just a few more steps. You need to let yourself be helped.
And so now I become open-minded. That's what that's called. So first I was honest, and now I'm open-minded, and now that awakens willingness in my mind. And willingness in my mind is where I really needed to be at, because I wasn't really willing to see God's will before, but now I am, because now peace has returned to my mind such that I can see my right mind. And this, of course, needs God's peace and needs his will in order for me to feel comfortable and safe and strengthened. Let's go on to 6.
6, now you have reached the turning point, because it has occurred to you that you will gain if what you have decided is not so. Until this point is reached, you will believe your happiness depends on being right. But this much reason have you now attained. You would be better off if you were wrong. This tiny grain of wisdom will suffice to take you further. You are not coerced, but merely hope to have a thing you want. And you can say in perfect honesty, I want another way to look at this. And 7.
Yes, so you can see 7 then becomes natural. It just sort of follows right along with it.
The final step is but acknowledgement of lack of opposition to be helped. It is a statement of an open mind, not certain yet, but willing to be shown. Perhaps there is another way to look at this. What can I lose by asking?
Exactly. So I begin to see now that there's no trade-off here. Peace is easy to establish once I know what peace is. Peace is always whole and undivided. There's no chance for the fact of that it doesn't work. It always works. I just wasn't willing to accept it before. And so I was holding on to guilt or willful self-pride or shame or blaming others or something else instead. And that's what was causing me to believe in suffering. Once I let it go, I believe in peace, joy, and loving kindness instead. Let's go on to the next section because that's what that talks about. We'd like to read peace, joy, and loving kindness.
I'll read it, Eric.
Thank you, Robin.
Peace, joy, and loving kindness. We said before that when a situation has been dedicated wholly to truth, peace is inevitable. Its attainment is the criterion by which the wholeness of the dedication can be safely assumed. Yet we also said that peace without faith will never be attained, for what is dedicated to truth as its only goal is brought to truth by faith. This faith encompasses everyone involved, for only thus the situation is perceived as meaningful and as a whole, and everyone must be involved in it, or else your faith is limited and your dedication incomplete. Previously, we learned a situation is a relationship, being the joining of thoughts. If problems are perceived, it is because the thoughts are judged to be in conflict. But if the goal is truth, that is impossible. Some idea of bodies must have entered, for minds cannot attack. The thought of bodies is the sign of faithlessness, for bodies cannot solve anything. It is their intrusion on the relationship, an error in your thoughts about the situation, which then becomes the justification for your lack of faith. I want the peace of God. To say these words is nothing, but to mean these words is everything. If you could but mean them for just an instant, there would be no further sorrow possible for you in any form, in any place or time. Heaven would be completely given back to full awareness, memory of God entirely restored, the resurrection of all creation fully recognized. No one can mean these words and not be healed. He cannot play with dreams, nor think he is himself a dream. He cannot make a hell and think it real. He wants the peace of God, and it is given him. For this is all he wants, and that is all he will receive. Many have said these words, but few indeed have meant them. You have but to look upon the world you see around you to be sure how very few they are. The world would be completely changed should any two agree these words express the only thing they want.
And in same chapter where we looked at the decisions, the same section, in fact, also is the law of two. It basically means that in order to see the non-duality of the truth, we need to see it from the perspective of what we thought we were lacking. So we need to see it with someone else. So this is why, in fact, AA tells you that you probably need a sponsor. And this is why that even though the Course in Miracles is a self-study program, you typically need to discuss it. That means tell other people what you're learning about. Not necessarily tell them that they should learn the Course in Miracles, but show them by your actions how it works for you, just like we show people by our actions about how Alcoholics Anonymous works for us. For people that have been through that program, we've seen, in fact, that we can't just go around saying, oh, I'm changed now, I'm changed now, I'm changed now. We actually have to act in a different way so people can see our sobriety, because they see now our emotional sobriety, they see now our mental sobriety and our physical sobriety. And now the picture is complete for them. And they see us truly as other people who are just as functional as they are and are just as peacefully able to deal with their problems as anybody else might be. And so this is what we want for ourselves. And this is what we learn to share with other people, is this is what we have learned, that we can have this. So we don't have to go saying I'm doing a Course in Miracles or I'm in AA or anything along those lines. Well, we have to be able to show people that we are mentally and emotionally and spiritually fit as well as physically fit. Physically fit, in fact, is the least important of them now. Not that it's not important, of course it is, but physically fit, in fact, is lesser fitness than mental fitness, lesser fitness than emotional fitness, and lesser fitness than spiritual fitness. We see now that those are all aspects of ourself, which also have to be filled. And so the emptiness of our suffering projected outside ourselves is useless, but the bringing the suffering into this altar within ourselves to exchange it for the peaceful recognition of our spiritual strengthening of our mind to see peacefulness and see calm, in fact, is the right way to see things. That, in fact, is what exactly we need and what exactly we need to be able to communicate so other people can see, in fact, that we all should be able to live in peace and harmony if possible. And when it doesn't seem possible, we all should return to simplicities like prayer and meditation and calming and so on and so forth, so that we can return to peace again as quickly as possible. So the last section here just demonstrates for us the reward of this whole thing is simplified. And in fact, I even end it with, I'm not really into poetry, but I even end it with a poem because in fact, great beauty is expressed oftentimes in art. So who would like to read the last part?
I'll finish up.
Great. Thank you, Robin.
God. There is a quote from the Course. We say, God is, and then we cease to speak. From a pure experience point of view, that is all that needs to be said. The true God of A Course in Miracles is pure oneness and cannot be described using our dualistic point of view and language. However, in order to understand the experience of our everyday world, the Course and this philosophy need to talk about God from a dualistic point of view at times, describing what God is like and what God is not like. Our goal is to use our language to describe God in a way that is as close to reality as we can, knowing we will never completely describe the true God. As we develop the philosophy, we will find this dualistic way of viewing God is ultimately illusory. But for now, we need to understand how the world we experience came to be. There are many descriptive statements that might be made about God, but it will be sufficient for this development to consider the following 4 aspects of God. 1, God is all that is, everything. There is nothing that is not God. 2, God is mind, thoughts, ideas, and nothing but all that is real. 3, God is pure love. All experiences of God are loving. 4, God creates. God is not static, but is in a constant state of creating. Do you want me to read the poem or this
Yes,
part?
please. Yeah, go ahead.
God again. Now the 4 aspects collapse into none, for God cannot be parsed. The ring has melted away, for there's nothing left to separate. The ego has evaporated, only a lost, cruel joke. Forgiveness is gone, for there is nothing left to forgive. The Holy Spirit is free. Our remembered friend led us home. The separated self has rejoined back into its natural loving state. Now we are, God is.
So we are this way one. And you may see in other cases people claiming that we are one, and then you're wondering how it is that they know that, because you see something other than what we've begun to see here, is that there has to be a process. If we are truly going to be one, then there must be a process that undoes the duality of our thought system, that eliminates the need for suffering, that eliminates the need for guilt, that eliminates the need for punishment, that eliminates the need for desires for things that seem to be lacking. These simply are not the way of the peaceful warrior or the peaceful saint or the peaceful truthful person, the peaceful religious character or whatever it is. These are not the ways of the peaceful person who knows the simple process of being relieved of suffering, to be strengthened in their mind so there is no chaos, there is no confusion, there are no contradictions, there is no lack then in terms of understanding the reality that we come from and that we want to be returned to. We want to be returned to the same peacefulness and the same calm and the same willingness to meet all of our needs, just like it was when we were children and our mother picked us up and instantly we were feeling peaceful again when she put us to her breast, or when she stroked our little chins, or when she changed our little diapers or whatever, and we were satisfied and happy. And we had gone from crying and being all upset to being suddenly peaceful and relaxed and smiling and being, so cute. Everybody is going like, whoa, look at the little baby, isn't he cute? And that's how we used to be. And that's how we are again, then, in this peacefulness in our mind, restored again to that innocence and restored again to that magnificence that everybody can look towards and say to themselves, I would like to be like that. I would like to have what that man has. I would like to have that what that woman has. I would like to have that peacefulness, and I would like to have that calm, and I would like to have that stillness in my mind that I can recognize the truth instead of being baffled constantly by confusion and conflicts and chaos and so on like that. So that's it for today. And I promise you next time we're going to do a case study, and a case study is a little different way. We haven't done any of those so far, but you can see I'm working towards being able to do case studies. And I think we'll have a lot of fun probably next week when we do some of that. So I hope you come back for that. I'm going to turn off the recording, but we can stay here. I'm not in a hurry to go anyplace.